Skill-based matchmaking has been around for a long time, but do we really know what it's doing to your kill-death ratio? After grinding through 100 games in both Call of Duty and XDefiant, I'm breaking down how these systems work to see if one truly rewards your skill, and if the other is just leveling the playing field. Let's dive in! Okay, before we start, I need to explain my self-imposed rules to make sense of what I'm going to show you. First, and most importantly, during these games I played at my best. However, I didn't play competitively, as in I didn't only use the meta. Instead, I focused on using guns and abilities that I was comfortable with without sacrificing variety. I call this playing competently. So for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, I used assault rifles, SMGs, battle rifles, and LMGs, leaving shotguns and snipers behind. Same thing for XDefiant except for battle rifles, obviously. When it comes to factions, I tried to use them all equally, but I didn't have DedSec or GSK unlocked at the start. Second, I only played the standard modes in both games, avoiding small map playlists or party game modes. That means quick play only. Third, I had crossplay enabled for both games, but XDefiant only gave me mouse and keyboard players for whatever reason. Fourth, I'm not here to test whether these games have skill-based matchmaking or not. I'm assuming COD has skill-based matchmaking and XDefiant's matchmaking is at the very least like older Call of Duty's pre-Modern Warfare 2019. Fifth and last, my analysis is based on my personal KD ratios, so I'm not considering other metrics like score per minute or win-loss ratio, since I couldn't measure them accurately on a match-per-match basis in XDefiant. So with that out of the way, let me show you my results for Call of Duty. Surprising nobody, it's a wild roller coaster, going up and down all the time, which aligns with many players' theory that when you have a good match, the next one's going to suck, and then the match after that will be good, and then it will suck again. But if you look at it carefully, you'll notice that sometimes this pattern extends over the course of several matches, so in that sense, it's kind of inconsistent. But we've known for a long time that skill-based matchmaking works like this, right? And to prove it, I'll show you my results for XDefiant. And wait a second, this doesn't look too different from Call of Duty's graph. The same extended pattern is present here, and even towards the end, it works the same way as Call of Duty, almost as if there wasn't any real difference. But that can't be right. One game has skill-based matchmaking and the other doesn't, right? So let me overlay both graphs. And they do look quite similar, to the point where I've had equal peaks in both games, sometimes at the exact same match count. This may reveal some personal patterns as a player, but not much more. Sure, we could look at the tendency lines and then we'll see that at the start I was worse in XDefiant than in Call of Duty, which makes sense as I was pretty new to the game, but then I ended higher in XDefiant than Call of Duty, which brings up more questions than answers, given that I've played Call of Duty for years. So, with only this information, we've hit a dead end here. So how do we solve this? Well, there is one thing we haven't tried yet. If you look at Call of Duty stats page and you look at your kill-death ratio, you'll notice that it's simply your total career kills versus deaths, and it's not your career average KD. That means that even if you have high KD games, but your kill and death counts are low, they won't have any effect on this number. Also, it is affected by playlists other than quick play, and if, for example, you went after the mastery camos and it took a long time to finish and you struggled with it, it affected this number as well. Therefore, it's not an accurate representation of your skill. But what happens if we use this method on our 100 game data? We get this, the 100 game player evolution graph, or just the evolution graph. Don't focus too much on the numbers here, because what this graph is really meant to show you is player growth, and it exposes the effects of skill-based matchmaking and perhaps its true purpose. Well, let's take a look at how this works. You'll notice that the first 10 matches have pretty wild results, and by match 10 it normalizes. After that the results become more consistent, but at the same time they're telling us that I've stagnated for a long time, not getting noticeably better or worse. The thing is, when players say that skill-based matchmaking is trying to keep them at a 1 KD, what's really happening is that it's trying to keep you in the same place, almost as if you were in a rank. And the only way to get out of there is to rank up. If you manage to do that, then the game will start to give you harder opponents more commonly. And if you want to stay in that rank, you have to keep up with them. But that also means your matches are harder. Now, There seems to be a hidden threshold of when the game thinks you ranked up, and it seems I hit that threshold at match 82, because from that point onwards, my matches became a lot more difficult and I couldn't keep up any longer, so I ranked down towards the end of this run. Now, let's look at XDefiant's graph to see if the lack of skill-based matchmaking makes any difference. And it does! It even resembles the tendency line. The same thing happens for the first 10 matches where it needs to normalize, but there's a huge difference this time with Call of Duty's graph, in that there are no signs of any similarities to a ranked play system. I got better and better over time and I didn't stagnate, simple as that. I'll overlay both graphs and make some comments. COD's matchmaking feels like ranked. The better you are, the harder the game will get. I'll reiterate that the game isn't trying to keep you at a 1 KD, but whatever your KD is, it'll try to keep you there. This system more than likely is also taking other metrics like score per minute and win-loss ratio, for example, and it may have a skill rating for everyone that it uses to match players accordingly, but that's where you feel the strictness of skill-based matchmaking. To be honest, my last 20 matches made me feel very discouraged and I wanted the run to end as soon as possible. As for XDefiant, I've got no comments. My growth as a player felt natural and I didn't feel manipulated at any point, as it should be. Now sure, why do all this work when I could just calculate my average and make my life easier? Well, this would be my average for both games. That's a little too high, because I'm by no means a 1.7 KD player. The problem with averages is that you could, for example, simply stay in your spawn, get a few kills and hide, and that would be a high KD game, but it wouldn't be representative of your real skill. Looking back at my XDefiant KD graph, that one match that was out of bounds was a 7.5 KD game. But in reality it was 15 kills versus 2 deaths, because we wouldn't let the enemy team out of their spawn that they couldn't fight back. By working with cumulative KDs, we will filter out those outliers. To end this KD ratio analysis, I want to take a look at another thing Call of Duty does in your stats page. You can see that it gives you your stats for the last 10 matches as well, and I remember that years ago, when Exclusive-Based, Drifter, JGod, and Sour made their skill-based matchmaking analysis, they came to the conclusion that Call of Duty takes the results of your last 5 matches to give you your next set of opponents. Since the game tells you about your last 10 matches now, I decided to calculate my last 10 matches KD for every single match, starting at match 10, to see if that tells us anything. Now, I believe that the results here are far more reflective of a player's real skill at any point in time, and so is a much closer approximation of the real KD ratios. Also, in Call of Duty's case, we can see a similar pattern to the first graph that I showed you earlier, where it goes up and down indefinitely, which I'm certain confirms Exclusive-Based, Drifter, JGod, and Sour's conclusion. You can see it in XDefiant's case as well, but it's not as noticeable, and you can still see my improvement towards the end, unlike COD where I somehow got worse. One last thing, and this is my biggest complaint actually. Whether you think skill-based matchmaking is a good thing or not, what is not okay at all is that Call of Duty is lying to us when they say ping is king. XDefiant does get to say it though. I very rarely got my best or even second best connection in Call of Duty, but in XDefiant it was incredibly consistent, despite the game being smaller, probably with a lot less servers too, and yet my connection was better, period. And the time of day wasn't a real factor either. Peak hours or not, it looks completely random. It almost feels as if it's using my connection quality to hinder me and make me more equal to my opponent sometimes. Needless to say, this is not acceptable. In conclusion, Call of Duty's matchmaking is a joke. I don't see how it's supposed to engage me more like this, which is why I never use the engagement optimized matchmaking term, because I don't believe in it. Trying to take this game seriously only leads to a less fun experience, so I won't. But XDefiant is a different story. Even if its stats page was bugged throughout this entire run, I could still keep track of my progression, and I did notice it. It felt nice to know that I was indeed getting better at it. I can take this game seriously. But, as evidenced by the first KD graphs I showed you, on a larger scope, the experience from game to game sometimes feels the same, regardless of the matchmaking system, and I believe that's why some players were convinced that XDefiant has skill-based matchmaking, even though it doesn't. It's also funny that XDefiant does show you your skill rating, but other than to prevent stomping on new players or even the protected bracket, I don't know how much it matters. Now, should Call of Duty remove skill-based matchmaking completely? No. And we know that older Call of Duties did have some form of it, much less strict than this one, but we should go back to that instead. And I mentioned the protected bracket, which is necessary, and there must also be a way to prevent reverse boosters from playing against those players. But in the end, Call of Duty demonstrates that skill-based matchmaking makes the experience feel artificial and needs to be toned down. But this doesn't end here, because there's a new Call of Duty on the horizon, and it'll be worth seeing if its glorified marketing demo will have skill-based matchmaking or not, so stay tuned for that. By the way, there's a link in the description of this video to my results, in case you want to look at them, analyze them further, so feel free to do that. But with that being said, after 200 total matches, XDefiant is the clear winner. Thank you for watching and goodbye!